Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's new weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. And we are so excited to begin a new year with a new evening show, broadcasting as always across all our platforms: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and TikTok. And the best place to see it is, of course, on YouTube, because if you're on TikTok, you won't see the videos that we're playing and things like that, but always good to see folk on TikTok. Michael Rennie says, get Sturgeon out. And that's something we can all agree with. And we're going to be talking about that in this show. And we're going to be looking at her latest edicts from on high about the extent to which we, the people, are able to literally socialise with each other, because they are encouraging people today to minimise their social interactions. Can you imagine a government actually saying that to people, saying you, the people, should not be meeting other people? You should be minimising the way in which you actually meet other people. Isn't that's actually sick-minded? But this is coming from our political class. And I'm not just going to knock Nicola Sturgeon. It's across the Western world and it's across Britain as well. And we've seen it for the last 2 years, and it's an absolute blooming disgrace is what it is. User1245 says, Sturgeon the vile nationalist. And Michael Rennie gives some Union Jack flags there. Now, good to see folk coming in also. Wonderful people, our amazing people who watch us on Facebook and YouTube. Good evening to Debbie. Good to see you first in as always. And Frankie. And nice to see Sandra again. All the best to you for 2022, Sandra. And Alan, of course, a great supporter of A Force for Good. And also Alan William Bell says, good evening. Good evening to you too, Alan. And good evening to Stephen and to Tommy. Nice to see Tommy and Adam as well. And Catherine, good to see you, Catherine. Catherine wishes everybody a happy new year. And Raymond is viewing from Wales, but normally from Northern Ireland. Great to see all these names coming in. Bill, great you're back, says Bill. Well, we're going to be back now. We're going to be back on a Wednesday evening. We had a great run of shows last year. We had 45 shows plus a 10-hour union telethon. 10 hours we were at that on the 11th of December. So we had a great show last year. We were broadcasting in the mornings, but the team took the collective decision that we were going to switch it around a bit, keep the same day, but do the 7 to 8 o'clock slot in the evening, in the belief, which is almost certainly going to be borne out, that we will reach more people. And that's what it's all about, reaching people with our positive message for the United Kingdom, our positive message of unity, our positive message of solidarity. And we've switched the wee studio around in the back as well, just to give you something different there in the background, with our wonderful banner that says, all for one, one for all. And isn't that the centre, the core of the unity message that we as British lovers promote? All for one and one for all, and never shall we be divided, because divided we will fall. Hello to Moshi from Argentina. That's wonderful to see you watching from all that way away, Moshi. Hope you enjoy the show. Good evening to Robert and to John from Kilwinning. And to Kenny Barker as well, who makes a comment there about the drinks garden in number 10. Why should he resign if Boris never got the email? We'll be speaking about the lockdown thing this later in the programme. Jack, good evening to you, Jack. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. It really is to see all these people. And please, folks, share the broadcast if you can. Get the message out there to one and all. We're competing with some big names tonight. We chose this slot to minimise the chance of us overlapping with other people, other supporters who might have programmes and so on. But we're aware that there are other shows on at this time, but it's virtually impossible to find a perfect time. But we think this is the best time for a once a week show. So folks, please do share it if you can. Now, a few things that we want to talk about. Particularly, we want to talk about Sturgeon's edicts today, and we have I think the Daily Record reported that. We'll see if we can bring that up, and I'll run through that with you. Just what she's basically saying we can and cannot do. Now, what's particularly interesting about this is that she was intending to banish people from watching, sports games. But then what happened? What came about was the rugby league, the rugby union people were saying that they were actually going to play the games in England rather than in Scotland. They were going to play the Six Nations games in England, and when she found out about that, of course, she changed her tune very quickly. And from the 17th, I believe, the places are going to be opened up again. The stadiums are going to be opened up again. Now, let me see if I can find that Daily Record article, which got the link to somewhere, but I'll bring that up in a moment. Callum says, shame key workers cannot go outside for refreshments and sandwiches. Yes, he's talking here, I think, on the Boris issue. And in fact, as he points out, they were possibly they were actually safer in the garden than in their stuffy offices. That's a point that no doubt they'll argue. Let me add to the stream this the COVID update. Now, can you scroll? If we scroll down that, and just let's read it. Just scroll down it. Let me bring it up a little bit more. Scroll down. Nicola Sturgeon announced changes to the current COVID restrictions during an address to the Scottish Parliament earlier today. Now, just scroll further down there. Large outdoor gatherings, what does it say? Restrictions on large events taking place outdoors will be scrapped from Monday, January the 17th. This means changes to the rules. Scots will be allowed to watch their favourite football teams in large numbers once again. But here's what's interesting. It says there, they'll have to have vaccine. Scots will still be required to show their vaccination status, which will now include booster doses. Okay, now isn't that interesting? So if you had 2 shots and you thought that was sufficient to please the state, no, you need a 3rd one if your vaccination status is to remain up to date. And mark my words, they'll bring in a 4th dose and you'll need a 4th dose. So there comes a time when people are just going to have to say, I'm not doing this anymore, because they will only update your vaccination status with every single booster. And if you don't get a booster, you will not be considered fully vaccinated. As it says there, it means that you cannot be fully vaccinated. To be fully vaccinated, you must have received all 3 jags. That's an absolute blooming outrage. An absolute outrage. Let's scroll a little further down. Here we go. Restriction on bars, nightclubs and restaurants. What does it say here? Other restrictions imposed during the festive break will be extended for a further week. Now, what this is that if you're running a bar or a restaurant, you can only do table service. You can't have people up at the bar milling around like normal people, And then just scroll a little bit further down, and what do we get? here we go. The Scottish government. Well, it's not a government, right? That really boils my proverbial when they say that. It's the Scottish administration. It doesn't have the powers of a government, okay? Scotland's not independent. It doesn't have the powers of a government. But the Scottish administration is considering expanding its vaccine passport scheme to include the likes of bars and restaurants. Think about that, okay? They're going to expand the vaccine passport scheme, which means like somebody like me, beer drinker Alistair, is not even going to get into a bar or a restaurant. That's just beyond parody. That's beyond parody. That's like one of the few things in life that, give it some kind of colour in life, is getting into a bar or a restaurant in the city centre. So I'm going to be excluded, am I? Because I've not been vaccinated. That's an absolute. Oh, it's beyond. It's just very, very bad. But Sturgeon says that it's something that they, quote, feel bound to give appropriate consideration to. Well, let me give appropriate consideration to you and your nastiness. Just scroll a little bit further down. And what does it say here? And it just goes on. Blah, blah. Scotland recorded 10,392 new cases of COVID in the past 24 hours. So what? So what? A case. This is the big lie. The big lie is that a case is infectious. Something is only infectious if you're actually shedding the virus as a consequence of it having affected you and made you have symptoms, okay? You're only infectious if you have symptoms, if you're coughing, if you're sneezing, if you're blowing your nose, if you're runny nose, if you've got headaches, all that sort of stuff. Only that way do you shed it to another person. Only that way are you personally infectious. Only that way can you infect another person. If you do not have any symptoms, then you're what's called healthy. And so that's the big lie that has kept this going for 2 years. And of course, the system has been trying to change all the medical, the medical knowledge in order to promote that massive lie. Anyway, enough of. Just scroll down a little bit further more, see what else there is. Yeah, enough of that. Enough of that. But in that article, it also said that the Scottish administration is attempting to. Is asking people to not to how did they put it? It was like to restrict their social interaction, asking us to restrict our social interaction. It's like asking us not to have a life. She's basically standing up there saying, don't have a life. As human beings, we are naturally gregarious. As human beings, we want to meet other human beings. But I'm telling you, you're not going to have a life anymore. You're just basically going to be my little robot that does what I tell you to. It's incredible that we have put up with these politicians for so long with this. And the reason we've done it is because this isn't the 17th century and there's no other options. We've got to wait for another 3 years until the next election comes around. Which maybe we'll have to do. Who knows? Maybe circumstances will change in another way. But goodness me, these politicians got off with anything these days. They really do. In a way that they would never have got away with back, 200 or 300 years ago. People just wouldn't have tolerated it. They wouldn't have tolerated being told to do things like that. Anyway, maybe it's for the better. Who knows? David says we must get rid of the Westminster Tories. Well, we need to get rid of people who promote these lies, whatever political party they happen to be in. Michael Rennie is asking a question there. How do you define a country? It's a good point, because we're going to talk about that. We've got a section coming up in the programme called Busting Indie Myths, which we'll get to later. And we're going to talk exactly about that thing, because that's essential to the Scottish nationalist point of view. And Michael says we don't even control our own borders. That's a point. That's a pity. Catherine says her new job wants her jabbed, and that's not funny. That's not funny at all. When they're actually saying that you can't have a job. And of course, has influenza taken a holiday? It certainly has, or at least they've started spelling it differently, put it that way. Sandra says she's never had to use her passport for any events. Thankfully, she hasn't been asked for it. Well, Raymond says, medical apartheid is a shameful denial of liberty. It certainly is that. Yes. So there's Sturgeon there doing her thing. James says, restrict our social interactions. Haha, that's so evil. We may as well be chickens in cages. Yes, exactly. And that's what they want, you see. That's what politicians like. You know, one of the failings of human beings naturally is you look to the political class to guide you, and that's quite right. We should do that, but we shouldn't invest too much of our hopes and too much of our thinking in the political class, because they're just human beings like us, and very often they're also human beings that are in a position of power, and some of them, not all of them, but some of them get power, and then they're loving it. They're loving the power that it gives them. And I'm talking generally here about all politicians of all political parties and all leadership. And if they can get the power, and if they can stand up and say, you know, I'm going to restrict your social interaction, let's see if they fall for this. And then suddenly people are all staying at home and restricting their own social interaction. The politician is thinking, hello, what else can I get them to do? How about I'm going to ask you to run along to the nearest, whatever, and jump off it. So let's see if they do that. Oh, they do. Well, what else can we do? You know, there are people who are like that. And we've seen that in Australia. I mean, some of these people who are running the federal places in Australia, they're exactly like that. They will just keep pushing and pushing and pushing until somebody pushes them back. And then they're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have taken it that far. So don't think that the politicians are going to give us a free, that one day they're going to turn around and they're going to go, you know, guys, yeah, just go back to what you were doing. You know, who cares about all of that? We'll scrub all of that. No, everything's is just getting ratcheted up. And as long as you're aware that that's happening, then you're not going to wake up one day and realize what happened. At least you'll wake up one day and you'll understand why you got into prison, why they imprisoned you. At least you'll be conscious of what's happening. That's what I'm trying to get the point across. Be conscious of what's happening, what they're doing to us, and let's work to find out how to rise above it. And as I always say, one good way of rising above it is to switch it off. You know, I have a friend who's cut himself off from all social media because it just was not doing his head any good. And he says he's living a much better life now, which I can perfectly understand. Anyway, we're broadcasting on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and also here on TikTok as well. British Drummer says, you're a true blue patriot. Thank you, British Drummer. That's a nice thing for you to say. And Frankie says he never went for the booster shot. And see, this is what's happening, says Ronald. Everyone in the US has to be jabbed before they can work anywhere. Well, I don't quite know how that is from state to state, but I know a lot of places are mandating that as well, which is very concerning. So, what's Callum saying? Sturgeon was at a funeral not obeying her rules. That's true. While people could not go and see members of their families buried. And she wasn't masking or social distancing. That's true. She doesn't get hit in the way that Boris gets hit by it, because the Scottish media, of course, are absolutely, in thrall to her. And so she gets away with stuff that, for example, as you point out there, Callum, Boris could never get away with. Jack says that he supports the Conservatives, but he's running out of patience with the Johnston government. I'm going to line up a video here with George Galloway in it, because I think he sums up something which is really, really good. It was on GB News last night, and it just sums up exactly what Sturgeon is about. Now, in this 2 or 3 minute video, which I'll just play in full, there is, I warn you, there is a 12-second section of Nicola Sturgeon talking. So you may want, if you're with children, you may want to cover their eyes, or you yourself may want to put on earplugs or something. But we'll just, I'll bring that up. I'll add it to the stream here, and we'll just
Nicola Sturgeon announced earlier
that
this afternoon that COVID restrictions on large outdoor
put
events will be lifted
sound right up
from Monday. Scotland is widely viewed, I think that's fair to say, as having had more draconian measures, certainly than England, throughout the course of the pandemic, certainly recently. The latest news means that football fans, they'll be able to return to Scottish Premiership matches next week. The Six Nations fixtures next month as well. Here's what she had to say.
A combination of the protective measures introduced before Christmas, the responsible action on the part of the general public, and the rapid delivery of booster vaccines have had a positive impact. As a result, I will indicate that from next week we will begin to lift the measures introduced before Christmas, but that we will do so in a phased and careful way.
Has she gone? From one
yes,
leader
she's
to
gone.
Another, the leader of the Workers' Party of Britain, George Galloway, joins me now.
Just make the
George,
video the full
very warm welcome to you.
page,
Thank you.
please.
Appreciate it as ever.
Thank you. Welcome.
Okay, from Monday, football matches, big crowds again. If you are one of those hospitality workers who run a business through what ought to have been a very busy Hogmanay, you may rather feel you've missed the boat. Will you be left with a sense that throughout the course of the pandemic, certainly latterly, you've been led by a First Minister who has been overcautious when it comes to this pandemic? Or do we take a more sympathetic view? It's an incredibly difficult balance to strike.
If it was overcaution, I would be more sympathetic, but it's political posturing. She called it wrong, and whatever else he's got wrong, Boris Johnson called it right a week after I did, on the basis of the South African experience. Omicron was the variant we'd been waiting for and would quickly become hegemonic, would be far more widespread, but far less deadly. And Boris Johnson acted on that instinct, on that evidence, and he was right. So England, including Carlisle, by the way, not that far away, had a bumper New Year period, including a lot of Scottish customers, where Scottish hospitality was completely devastated. Now, we're being asked to believe, Colin, that only 500 people can attend a match on Saturday, but 50,000 can attend a match from Monday. What's the science of that? It's completely ridiculous. This is a huge climb down, a U-turn by Nicola Sturgeon. Only GB News will call it out as that because I'm afraid the Scottish media has been Finlandized by the Scottish nationalist government and hardly says boo to Mrs. Sturgeon's goose. But they were saying just 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, that mass gatherings would continue to be restricted until April. And it was only the prospect of games, including actually moving to England, that concentrated their mind wonderfully. The people in Scotland are saying enough is enough. We've lost enough through all of this. And the posturing is about being different from the government in London. Has nothing to do with public health, nothing to do with COVID-19. If it wasn't coronavirus, it would be something else. It's all about striking a pose that Scotland is another country, a separate country, a foreign country to the rest of this small island.
Very well said. I'll just repeat his last words there. He said, it's all about striking a pose that Scotland is another country, a separate country, a foreign country to the rest of this small island. That's absolutely what she has to do. And as he pointed out, it doesn't matter whether it's this particular medical situation with the virus or whether it's something else. It's all about striking a pose that Scotland is another country, a separate country, a foreign country to the rest of this small island. And that's the attitude that really needs to go. And he did sum that up very well. And somebody said to me today, actually, GB News is like one of the best things that's actually happened to the United Kingdom in the past 12 months, with which I would definitely concur. And maybe someday we'll get invited onto GB News. That would be wonderful. It would be great to have AFFG as a guest on GB News. GB News folk, if you're watching, we're up for it. Definitely count us in. Please do get us on there if you can. Well, yes, Alan says, I hope all those in hospitality remember this at the ballot box. Well, here's the thing as well, is this year, 2022, we have our 10th annual birthday. A Force for Good will have been going for 10 years come spring. And we are looking about, and we've got our eye on a particular place in Glasgow City Centre where we want to have a celebration. We want to have a union social, and we can get 50 people there, okay? However, we can't get 50 people there if Sturgeon is going to still have these ridiculous table service laws, you know, or if she shuts it down even more, or if she demands vaccine passports. I mean, if she demands vaccine passports to get into a restaurant, that's A Force for Good will never be organising an event again, because I'm not going to organise something in a premises that requires vaccine passports, okay? And I can organise celebrations for like groups of 50 people, okay? So this is how it affects hospitality, okay? This is how it affects it, because you know, I'm not just going along as one person. I'm bringing 49 other people with me. But I'm not going to do that to any place that's got that requires passports, or even that requires just table service, because we just want to mill about. You know, we don't want to be sitting as if we're in school or something like that. We want to be milling about. Ronald, thank you, says, congratulations on your 10th year anniversary. Yes, that's coming up in the spring. Stop it, McClellan says, never thought I'd agree with Mr. Galloway. Well, he's certainly bang on the money as far as sticking it to the Scottish nationalists are concerned. N10 says, align your camera on TikTok. I'm afraid this is the best that we can do on TikTok, because it has to be portrait, and we can't move it any other way because of the other cameras that are focused in on us at the moment. But I take your point. Sir. So yeah, that brings us nicely into our weekly section, which is going to be called Busting Indie Myths. Busting Indie Myths. And what we intend to do, is to every week address an indie myth for 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll cut that little video out and we'll put it onto TikTok, we'll put it onto YouTube, we'll put it onto Facebook, we'll put it onto Instagram, we'll put it onto Twitter. And in the course of the year, we'll have addressed 45 or thereabouts indie myths, and we'll have a nice, we'll have an explanation that busts that apart. And we'll try to do it logically as much as we can, in a coherent manner, and it will all add up, because this is also working towards the concept of a book that we have that will be dealing with exactly these sorts of things. Now, the first indie myth that we want to bust is the foundational myth of Scottish nationalism, and it all goes to the idea that Britain is not a nation. Okay, the idea that Britain is not a nation is a foundational myth of Scottish nationalism, and it's been around since Scottish nationalism came together. They think in their heads that there's only like separate countries, and when they joined together they didn't form anything greater than that. Okay, and you hear some unionists think that as well, you know, because you hear them talk about how Britain is a union of nations. And of course, to an extent, you can consider that it is. But we as unionists like to think of Britain primarily as a nation of unions. And this was summed up extremely well in a letter which appeared in The Scotsman this week. And I'm just going to read it out. I'm just going to read it out right now. It appeared in The Scotsman on the 6th of January 2022, and it begins, in his New Year speech, Sir Keir Starmer described the United Kingdom twice as a union of nations. As a lawyer, he will know that that's not strictly correct, and that we are actually a nation of unions. Wales formed a union with England in 1536, Scotland and England formed their union in 1707 to form Great Britain, and Ireland formed a union with Britain in 1801 to form the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, now Great Britain and Northern Ireland. On top of this, we had the Union of Crowns in 1603. That's when, as you will recall, the Scots King James VI became James VI of the realm of Great Britain. Now, these unions, as the letter writer says here, caused all sides to give up some power and influence for the greater good. And by and large, they have all survived the passage of time. There is, of course, a lot of ambiguity about these things, with country and nation being applied to the whole or the constituent parts, and nobody complains about this, as they help us to rub along together. But it would be good to see politicians with some real sense about how our current arrangements actually came about. The Labour Party in particular should understand the value and obligations of being in a union and what that means. So that's how we conceive it. Britain is a nation. It is a nation of unions built up over time, and we do not want to see that nation destroyed. And we wrote about that in our magazine here, Do More Together. One of the very first articles that we wrote was why Britain is a unitary state and a nation, and it's all explained there. And if you want to buy this magazine, it's a £5, and we'll put the link up there on our Facebook and Twitter pages. But as we say, Britain has all the evidence of nationhood. We have a common head of state, common parliament, common political system of representative parliamentary democracy, an international boundary, a national citizenship, language, national currency, national passport, national anthem, national flag, national armed forces, a seat on international bodies and worldwide British embassies, and even civil law is integrated, with the Supreme Court in London being the highest court for all UK civil cases. And so Britain is definitely a nation, and we proceed on that basis. And it doesn't matter how many times Scottish nationalists will say Britain's not a nation or the United Kingdom is not a nation. We believe it is a nation. It has all the evidence of being a nation, and it is a nation. It is a nation. Now, Scottish nationalists don't want to think about that, because that makes their job a lot harder, because it becomes not just independence for Scotland, it actually becomes a matter of destroying a nation, the nation of Britain. So they don't want to think about it that way. But when we think about it that way, then we realise the value of maintaining it as a nation. And that's a very powerful point, a very powerful point. So, busting that particular indie myth, we assert that Britain is a nation, and those who say it's not are wrong. in our next show, we'll bust another indie myth. Look out for that. Excellent. Well, we always have a competition, and our competition is based around this day in British history. On this day, which is the 12th of January, on this day, British history matters. Let's put up that. Now, what happened on the 12th? Well, I couldn't find very much that happened on the 12th, except there was on the 12th the first reading of the Clandestine Marriage Act. The Clandestine Marriage Act. Now, what was that? That was an act in England and Wales back in 1753, which was the first act to legalise marriage, and it made it slightly harder for people to get married, and it was still easier for people to get married in Scotland. And in fact, you could get married a lot younger in Scotland as well. So when the Clandestine Marriage Act passed in 1754, lots of people in England took the opportunity to get married clandestinely in Scotland because it was easier for them to do. So that was the only thing really that happened on this day that I could find out. I'm sure other things happened as well. So what I'm going to talk about is what happened tomorrow, 13th of January, which is the 13th of January in 1915. The Protestant missionary Mary Slessor passed away, and she died in Nigeria. Now, many of us will know of Mary Slessor because she's the lady that appears on the £10 Clydesdale banknote. And from the age of 27, she was inspired by the works of David Livingstone, and she spent almost her entire adult life serving in Africa, especially in Nigeria, where she is particularly known for rescuing twins who were otherwise treated with superstition and left to die. And she only returned twice to Scotland during her entire adult life. Secondly, to look after her mother. And when she went back out to Nigeria, she found out that her mother had died, and she wrote of her loneliness out there, which is not surprising. She goes, "Heaven is now nearer to me than Britain. No one will worry about me if I go up country in Nigeria," where she obviously saw her life's work. And so she was buried on the 13th of January in Juketown, which is now known as Calabar, and her coffin was draped in the Union Jack. And I got that information from an article which I read called "Serving God and the Empire, Mary Slessor in Southeastern Nigeria, 1876 to 1915, in the Journal of Religion in Africa." And she's got a memorial in Dundee where she had grown up, which is outside Steeple Church. And there's also Mary Slessor Gardens at the Dundee waterfront. And there is also a memorial gardens. There's a small memorial to her in Union Terrace Gardens in Aberdeen. So that was Mary Slessor, passed away on the 13th in 1915. Great Scottish and British missionary, again from Scotland, just like David Livingstone. And then on the 14th of January in 1872 will be 150 years since Greyfriars Bobby passed away. The dog perhaps Scotland's most famous dog, who passed away in Greyfriars Kirkyard. And of course there's a memorial to him just outside the kirkyard as well. So Greyfriars Bobby died in 1872, 150 years ago, on the 14th of January. Made famous, of course, by the Disney film. Good. Comments here on TikTok. We're reading comments on Facebook and also on Twitter and YouTube, and when we can on TikTok. Devlink says, can I ask you a question? Please do. What's your opinion of the Conservative Work Party? What should be the repercussions? We don't really have an opinion on it, to be frank with you, other than to say that everybody should be free from now on to do what they want. We're not going to go into whether or not, we're not going to criticise anybody for breaking any rules when we ourselves don't believe that the rules should have existed in the first place, if you see what I mean. So it's not something that we would get worked up about, other than to note that, of course, politicians often think of themselves as a law to themselves. We spoke about that earlier, but that just comes with the territory of that. So Frankie says he doesn't care if Boris attended a lockdown party. Everyone has broken the rules one way or another during the last couple of years, and anyone who says they haven't is a hypocrite. Boris yes. Alan says Sturgeon forgets she was the one who sent untested patients to care homes at the very start. Yes, indeed. Absolutely. James just fires in there. Britain is the greatest nation in the world. We absolutely concur with that. And we've got an article up there. The UK is a nation of unions and a nation of families. And you can check that out on our website. Good to see Ashley. Hope you're enjoying life these days. If you are on the internet, please check out Ashley's YouTube channel, which is called That Preston Journalist. And Ryan says, one kingdom, one country, nothing more and nothing less. Mark Gregster says, on the 12th of January 1682, well, there you go, today, the Presbyterians became an underground movement of resistance to the Crown and government. 1682. Yes, I can't imagine those guys sitting around agreeing with somebody like Nicola Sturgeon, telling them what to do. I mean to say, imagine that. I mean, imagine if she got transported back to the 12th of January 1682 and goes into the middle of some covenanting session and stands up and goes, I want you all to restrict your social interaction. I want you all to do what I tell you. She would be lucky. You know, she would, I mean, I don't even want to say it, but put it this way, nobody would be listening to her. That's for sure. And she would make sure that she didn't have an opinion again. That's for certain. Oh my. And that's just a few years ago as well, you know. It's a few years ago. Well, I'll note that down, Mark. Thanks for pointing that one out. Somebody should do a comedy like Nicola Sturgeon gets transported back in time to like the period of the Covenanters. And she's like walking about trying to tell people what to do, and just see how well she gets on with that attitude. And it would be a pretty short program, I should imagine. Just Me Again says, do you think Nicola Sturgeon actually wants a referendum, or is it all bluff? I think Nicola Sturgeon understands very well the limitations that she is within, but she has to keep her activists chomping at the bit, and she's got to give the impression that it's just around the next corner. And so she's got to speak and act in such a way as to keep her gullible supporters on side. For our part, we do not believe that there will be a second referendum before the next British general election, which is in May 2024. However, that does not mean that we sit about and rest on our laurels. That does not mean that we are complacent. What it means is that we should use this time in order to give our supporters the tools to make the case for the United Kingdom and to rebut the Scottish nationalist indie myths. Okay, we should use this time to educate and prepare for such a possible eventuality, because once 2024 comes around and you have a new British government, then things could change very quickly. And then when 2026 comes around, if you've got for example, if you've got a Labour Lib Dem coalition in Westminster, once the Scottish election comes around in 2026, then, circumstances will be different then, and you might end up with something like a referendum. So we've got to always prepare. We cannot be complacent, because believe me, the Scottish nationalists are always working on this, and they have to, because they're a multi-million-pound operation, and they have people paid good wages simply to agitate all the time. These are people paid a lot of money to agitate, and their jobs are not going away. Give you an example. On the front of the Sunday National, SNP and New Move to step up spring indie push. And so I read this so that you don't have to. And it, some guy here, Tony Giugliano, I don't know, the SNP's policy convener. Now, he's going to be on a good wage, and it's his job basically to mess up the United Kingdom. It's his job to agitate constantly. And so what he's doing is he's organising seminars to teach activists how to make the case against the United Kingdom. So these are multi-million-pound funded people with a multi-million-pound organisation that's not going to stop. And it comes down to people like ourselves and the great people who are watching to do what we can in order, in our way, to try to combat this, because these people are not stopping. And we need to use this time in order to build up our resources and in order to make the case for the United Kingdom, which is exactly what we're doing. What do you say to a diehard independent supporter to change their mind? We would say tune in regularly to our weekly programme Good Evening Britain, where we will be making the case every week for the United Kingdom and where we will be busting indie myths. And by the end of the year, you will have had an education in Britishness. You will have had an education in unionism, in unity, and in solidarity. And if we've been unable to change your mind, then so be it. So be it. Please do give us a follow on TikTok, and thank you for Darren B20 for giving us a follow. And if you're on YouTube, please do subscribe to us on YouTube. Click that button. Good. Well, our competition, I'm going to ask a question. Okay, it's competition time. I'm going to ask a question on one of the historical things that I mentioned, and the winner gets this tin of sweeties, which lovely sweeties. I've tried some of them. in a nice presentation tin with a Lancaster bomber flying over the White Cliffs of Dover. And it says there, to commemorate the 100th anniversaries of the Royal British Legion and Simpkins, which are the makers of these sweeties. So the winner will get one of these winging their way to you. And how do you win? What you do is you send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and the first person to get the right answer will get this sent to them. Won't get sent until the beginning of next week, but it will get sent to you. Okay, so the question that we are asking, based on our On This Day in British History, is on the 13th of January in 1915, which Scottish missionary passed away in Nigeria and is buried there? That's the question, and we'll announce the winner just a couple of minutes before the end, which is in 9 minutes' time. So Bill Baxter says it's not the hardcore indie supporters we should focus on, it's the undecided and the ones who are being led astray by the hardcore lot. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Well, Sandras points out, we are the stronger numbered side, yet due to people voting wrongly, we don't show our numbers. Now, something that's very important there that Sandra brings up as well is a lot of our folk don't vote. They don't even vote wrongly, they just don't vote. And we've got the council elections are coming up in Scotland in May, which we'll be talking about closer to the time. But the council elections are very critical in Scotland, very critical, because they are the people who basically control your local bylaws and set the council tax rates and ensure the streets are kept clean, and you know they're the ones who like affect your daily lives. The council elections are extremely important, and it's important to have pro-UK or pro-UK coalitions in as many of these councils as we possibly can, and vote out the SNP and especially the Scottish Cabbage Party, okay, who masquerade as ecologists but are anything but and do not have Scotland's best interests at heart. So we have to get rid of the Scottish Cabbage Party or the Scottish Cabbages from the council chambers this May, and that's going to be a focus that we really need to be working on. Yeah, Ernest says no more referendums until the year 2222. In the year 2222, if there are still more referendums to do. Okay, let's get rid of that banner there. Well, let's see if we've got a winner actually at this stage. I'll just bring this up. Yes, we do have a winner, and I'll just write the person's name up here. We have a winner. We have a winner. It is Tommy Mowat. Congratulations, Tommy. The question was, on this day, tomorrow, 13th of January, 1915, which Scottish missionary passed away in Nigeria? And it was, of course, Mary Slessor, who is the lady on the back of the £10 Clydesdale banknote. And so this These sweets will be winging their way to you, Tommy. We'll be sending them on Monday. Okay, so you get them sometime next week. Excellent. Thanks very much. 2 or 3 other people there with the right answer also, but Tommy just put you to the post. Debbie says, congratulations, Tommy, as does Stephen. And James says, good work, Tommy. Alan says, well done, Tommy. And Jeff says, well done, Tommy. And Sandra says, well done, Tommy. And Super Typist says, congrats, Tommy, as does Sandra. Fantastic. Sandra says, well done. And Stephen says, is that a poppy on the front of the tin? It is, because this is to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Royal British Legion. And so that's an R and a poppy shaped like a B and an L for Legion. And it's a wee Union Jack there as well. Yes, so congratulations, Tommy. And Tommy says, thank you. Good stuff, Tommy. Good to see you. Good to see you there. Well, here's a nice comment, or an interesting comment from Craig Shearer. He says, forgive me, I'm on the fence regarding indie, but I've seen a lot of your videos and they make a lot of sense to me. Thanks, Alistair. Well, thank you, Craig, for that comment. That's exactly what we're trying to do here. And also want to thank everybody on TikTok as well that's coming in. And it's good that you disagree with us on TikTok as well, because we're happy to see and listen to the arguments on TikTok which are against unity and solidarity, because we're always interested in why people would be against that. James says Craig should also get some sweets for that alone. Indeed. Sandra says that she gifted her tin to her mum, who loves it. That's nice to know, because Sandra was a winner of one of those tins previously. Oh, Alan was a winner at the Union Telethon, and he says thanks for the smart RAF tin that held the tea bags, but they didn't last long. Good. Well, you've got your tin there for posterity, Alan. Glad you got that safely. Glad you got that parcel safely. Craig says he's sweet enough, he doesn't need any. Good. So there's quite a few people coming in on TikTok with their points of view, not all of which are our way of thinking, but many of which are our way of thinking. So that's good, 50-50, which is what we expect on TikTok. Please give us a follow, whether you're for us or against us on TikTok, please. That's wonderful. Thanks very much. Well, look, this has been our first episode of Good Evening Britain. We didn't have a guest this week, but we are aiming for guests every week, or as many weeks as we can. And we can get them actually not just only in the studio here, but we can also get them, of course, online. So if you'd like to be interviewed by us, if you've got something specifically that you'd like to say and you're for the union, then please do drop us an email and we'll see what we can do. It would be great to have you on. And it would be great to interview you. So please, if you think you can come on the show, please come on, or suggest somebody who might want to be. James enjoyed it. Great first episode of 2022. There's going to be a lot more every Wednesday evening at 7 to 8. Stephen says, it's all about having a civilised debate. Thanks, Alistair, and thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Stephen, for everything. Brilliant. Super Typist says, I have now marked next Wednesday's show in my phone calendar. Wonderful. Good to see you, Super Typist. Hope to have more interaction with you as the weeks and months and years go ahead. Tommy enjoyed it, as did Catherine. Ronald says, my cat, Callie, says hello to the UK. She's right here by the computer screen, pawing at it in agreement. Fantastic. That's an intelligent cat. Stop It McClellan says, keep up the good work. And Raymond says, thoroughly enjoyed tonight. That's wonderful, Raymond. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. As does Ernest. YouTube doesn't always notify you, says Super Typist. That's right. That's right. Sandra says, it's great to be here with you all. All the rest of the week can get frustrating with the news and one-sided media. Isn't that so true? And that's one of the things that we do here. And one of the benefits is that you can see other people who agree with you. You know, you can see that you're among like minds, and you can know that you're not alone. And that in itself is valuable, especially in a day and age where legally, here in Scotland, for example, Nicola Sturgeon is declaring her intention to try to make sure that people reduce their social interaction. Like that's the law now, you know, we've got to reduce our social interaction. So if you actually can't do it out there physically, at least you've got a home online, which is one good thing. So Callum, thanks for your comments as well. Alan just says, click the YouTube bell and it should notify you. Well, on that point of view, I am going to bring it to an end. I'm going to say we'll be back next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. We'll see you all then. And it just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the Queen. See you next week.